Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining this training from Outreach to Impact, how IVP programs can build powerful media partnerships that drive change. I'm Hannah Dunlop, the Communications Coordinator for Safe States. So I'm just going to do a few housekeeping items before introducing our presenter, Liz Voiles. So if you have any questions throughout this webinar, you can just drop those directly in the Q&A function in Zoom, and then we will address those at the end. So if you can reference what topic you're talking about when you ask those questions, that would be great. Additionally, you can introduce yourself in the chat or just have general conversation with the other attendees throughout the webinar. We want this to be as interactive as possible for a webinar. But with that, I'm going to launch a short poll that you can fill out as people trickle in, and I will hand it over to our presenter, Liz Voiles, the principal of Brass Ring Communications, to get us started.
Thank you so much, Hannah, and thank you to Safe States for having me today. I'm really honored to be here. I'm a huge fan of really all of your work in the injury prevention field. And I can't think of a more meaningful way to conduct a communication strategy webinar than to inform all the great work that you all are doing. So thanks so much for signing up to be here and for making it on the webinar. I know that many of you are probably contending with some icy, snowy weather right now. Many of you may have children home. So you have really beat the odds to be here today, and I'm grateful. All right, we can get started as people are still filling out the poll and go to the first slide, Anna. All right, so I'm Liz Voiles, and I lead a communications team in Washington, D.C. called Brass Ring Communications. And we are a mighty team of 7, and we do a lot of earned media on our team. We also do a lot of fundraising strategy, marketing, digital strategy, and events. And we work with a lot of folks who work in public health. So again, thrilled to be here talking to you all. It feels like home. So we'll move on to the next slide. These are just some of our partners. You can see that a lot of them are in the public health field. We have been working for the last decade with these groups to try to explain to policymakers and to the American people why public health is important, why injury prevention saves lives. Next slide. These are just a few of the publications and media outlets where we place experts to make them thought leaders in the national conversation about big policy issues that affect the lives of Americans. So we talk to journalists every day, all day, and I'm going to share with you today some of what we've learned about what journalists are looking for now and how to create relationships with them. Next slide. Okay, so we have a big agenda today. We are going to be talking about how to create relationships and why you should create them in the first place. So we're going to talk about objectives. We're going to talk about defining your target audience and why that's important. We're going to talk about key messages. We're going to talk about your various channels that could potentially reach your audiences, including media. We are going to talk about why you should spend time and resources on doing storytelling to those audiences. We're going to talk about creating relationships. We're going to get down to brass tacks and talk about the details of a win-win relationship. We're going to talk about how you can ready your spokespeople internally and externally, if you're going to be using partner voices, in order to give journalists what they need for their stories. And then lastly, we're going to talk about measurable goals and monitoring. And then we're going to give you a few tips and tricks about how you can take some action after leaving this webinar, even if you don't have a lot of new resources or any at all to get the job done. All right, next slide. Okay, so first things first, I encourage everyone to start with why. So this is a good exercise for both us communicators internally, as leaders on our teams, but also with an eye towards creating those relationships. So there's some of the reasons why you might want to do earned media and really invest in that medium is to educate your constituents if you are in public service or the other folks, the clientele you serve, about your work, why it's important, what they can come to you for. You want to think about how those constituents are already consuming media. The easiest way for you to reach them is to work through established channels that they already use and that they already trust. So for certain audiences, that's going to be TikTok. For other audiences, it might be local broadcast news. And then still for other ones, like we work a lot with Washington, D.C. policymakers on Capitol Hill, it would be the Washington Post. So you want to really get granular about who those key audiences are and what they consume. A second reason why you might want to use earned media to communicate is that you want to let folks know how to keep their families safe and healthy. You likely, if you're on this Zoom right now, you likely are very well informed about the ways in which people can keep themselves safe and avoid injury. More informed than the average bear. So how can we use those channels in order to educate people about how they can become healthier and safer? And then a third reason, this is not an exhaustive list, is that you might want to inform the work of decision makers. A lot of them could be policymakers, but there could be others who affect your work, who affect your funding levels, and right now may not see the value in financially supporting your work or giving you the authority to do your job. And so speaking to them through the channels that you know they read and watch and listen to, it can also be an important way to use earned media to advance your organizational strategic objectives. Next slide. Okay, so why should we have a strategy in the first place? Great question. We're all busy folks, and spending time creating a communications plan might not be at the top of your list when it feels like you're drinking through a fire hose every day at work. The reason why it's really important to have a strategy and to go through some of the exercises we're going to be talking about in a moment is that it helps save money and resources. It also helps create achievable goals that you can count as wins, both internally and externally. So when you're thinking about your strategy, again, you want to think about the broad strategic objectives of your organization. Are you a local health department that is looking to serve your city or town and make sure that that more kids get swimming lessons every summer? Are you looking to educate parents about how they can make sure that their teen who's learning how to drive is safe? So thinking through that lens and then applying that to how you do communications is really important. Let's think also about some of the biggest challenges for the populations you serve. You all probably have a good sense of the data in your state or city on, how folks can make choices to live longer, healthier lives and really thrive. You also probably have data that shows how people are more at risk to get injured. How can you use earned media to help people be more aware of what will keep them healthy and safe and avoid injury? We want to think through how we could use earned media to advance a cause or inform a larger conversation about an issue. Sometimes there are national conversations or local conversations about an issue that don't actually match the evidence that we all know exists on how to save lives. So, how can we inform that debate? And then the more I talk to communications folks in the nonprofit and public spheres, the more I have found that sometimes they find it difficult to create internal consensus to invest in and prioritize communications. So one way to help gain that internal consensus is to use earned media to take credit for wins, both for your communications department, but then also for the larger goals of your organization. If you have successfully been able to reduce drowning deaths in those kids or reduce car accidents for teens, how can you use earned media to get the word out about those wins? All right, next slide.
Liz, before we advance, can you just answer for participants defining the difference between earned, paid, and owned media so everybody's on the same page?
Absolutely. That's a great question. Okay. Earned media is a lot of times we call this public relations, right? So this is when we use working through journalists for either broadcast, print, or digital media to get our message out. Owned media are things like our website or our email list. Those are free ways where we can leverage channels that we own access to get our message across. So if you have a newsletter, for instance, that is one of the most overlooked and effective ways to get your message out. Then we have paid media. Paid media is when we boost a post on social. It's when we take out an ad in the paper. It's where we run a commercial on television or radio to advance our cause. So those are the three types: earned, owned, paid. Great question. Okay, so let's talk about creating a communications plan here. What are some of the key things that we need to include? So one is that we really want to make sure that we have our audiences down pat. We want to define those with a specificity that ensures that we are using resources to communicate with a very particular group of people. Now, those key audiences will change depending on the specific campaign you are running. So going back to that anti-drowning campaign, going back to that teen driving campaign, there are different decision makers at play there that who you are going to be appealing to, or an elderly falls campaign. And you want to think pretty granularly about that teen you're trying to reach, about that parent you're trying to reach. What do they read? What do they listen to? Who are the trusted messengers that they listen to? And you want to work within those trusted channels and with those trusted experts. Key messages are very important. We're going to break those down in a second in more detail. Make sure that you have key messages before you start a campaign. You want to be familiar with the norms and protocols within your office. That's something that only you and your office will know. Who is allowed to speak on the record, and what are they allowed to say and not say? You want to think through having an editorial calendar which will help you plan for the year. There are always going to be elements of an earned media strategy where you may have to do some rapid response in order to break through and respond to the news of the day. But there are also lots of things that you can plan ahead. Make sure that when you do these things, you're sharing it internally, that you're getting the consensus that you need in order to deploy your plan. Make sure that your plan isn't 30 pages long. Make sure you've got a cheat sheet version, especially for those busy decision makers who you might only be able to catch on a walk between one meeting and another. So think about all these things and making it operational. Next slide. All righty. So now we're going to talk about your audience. So the first thing that you want to think about is where these folks are. Are you looking to reach an audience that is local? Are you looking to reach an audience that's statewide? Because that's going to affect the exact journalists and media outlets that you reach out to. You want to think through demographic information about who you're trying to reach. If you're trying to reach a certain age group, race, ethnicity, who are at specific risk for a certain condition, you want to think carefully about what the media patterns of that group are before you design your strategy. You want to think about persuasion. A lot of times we find that it's really comfortable and feels good to speak to people who already agree with you and to sort of write off the others. You want to think about who already agrees with you. You want to think about who may never get on board and agree with you. And then you really want to focus on that middle group. Who are the people who don't know about your issue yet, who haven't made up their minds yet, but could have a key role in advancing your priorities? You want to think carefully about how you can get the message out to that group and make them your key audience. So no matter what, if you are trying to move the needle on a particular issue, you want to think through who that decision maker is. If you can have an example of them in your mind, that is going to make your strategy even more potent. All right, next slide. All right, key messages. What the heck are key messages? So the first piece of information you should have in mind is that you really want to focus on the number 3. We always encourage 3 clear, concise, and compelling key messages, because we have found that that is the most effective number of messages where folks come away and they can actually remember them. So if we get into more than 3, we're getting into dicey waters where folks may get overstimulated and not come away with much. Using simple language is really important. I always tell folks, if you have a relative, a well-meaning relative who asks you at Thanksgiving, who asks you at Hanukkah, at Christmas, around the dinner table, what you do, maybe it's an aunt, maybe it's an uncle, maybe it's a grandparent, and they're not familiar with your work, and you took a second probably and thought about how to describe what you do in plain English to that person, that's what you want to tap into when you are speaking to media. There are a lot of folks who do not have familiarity with some of the jargon and the acronyms that are used in the field every day. The next thing you want to keep in mind is a call to action. So I'm going to show you an example of this in a moment in a video. But if you are running a campaign and you want people to find out more information about it on your website, for instance, you want to tell them exactly where to go. You don't want them to have to click around. You want to give them the exact page. If you don't have a call to action for the particular interview that you're doing, then you want to make sure that you're giving them a rolled up summary takeaway at the end of that last point you really, really want them to come away remembering. The last thing I'll tell you is that repetition is good. There are a lot of natural conversations we have with people where if we repeated the same thing that we said a moment ago over and over to a friend or a colleague, they might think that we're losing our marbles a bit. But in a media interview, it is a good thing to repeat your key points numerous times to make sure that that journalist includes them in their story. Next slide. Next thing we want to talk about is what to say in these 3 crucial key messages. So you want to picture that audience in front of you, or that particular person that you're trying to reach out to, who you have in your head. What are the 3 points that they absolutely must know in order to take the action that you would like to inspire, or to come away with that takeaway that you want them to hold on to? The second thing is, if you have that persuadable audience, that audience that hasn't made up their mind yet, and you want to tell them why they should care enough to align with you or care enough to take your action, what is in it for them to take your action? Why does it benefit them? And this is a really crucial point that may seem very simple, but I can't tell you how many folks don't quite think through that. They might think through what's in it for the organization that is doing the media, but not necessarily for the person sitting on their couch or with their earbuds in on a walk, listening to you talk, or reading the newspaper in the morning. Why should they care? And that's worth a fair amount of consideration before you write down your key messages. Make sure that you have a clear call to action. Don't just tell them, go to our website. Tell them what your website is. And then the next piece, after you have those 3 clear and concise messages, is only then do you think about the objections that folks may have to your cause and how you want to counter them. So countering them is not in those first 3 key messages. Those are just about what you want to accomplish. If then somebody says, it's too expensive, it takes too much time, I'm too busy, it's not a priority, then you want to think about how to counter those points. Some of the information that you should check out that is for free and available right now on key messaging for public health issues are at the bottom of the screen. One thing that I always encourage people to do is, if there has been polling or messaging research on your issue, use it. Don't reinvent the wheel. Don't try to intuit what those audiences want. Go and do a bit of research on whether or not there's already been opinion research on your issue. And some of the groups who are making public health opinion research open and available to people like you for free are the Public Health Communications Collaborative, the Communications Network, and the de Beaumont Foundation. So I encourage you to sign up for their newsletters and tune in to what they have to offer. Okay, next slide. Okay, here is our example of 3 key messages. I always love kind of recent trending examples. So we're going to watch this video of Mayor Mamdani in New York, and we're going to have a little pop quiz after we do.
Don't let the snow fool you. Summer is closer than you think. We often tell young people what they shouldn't be doing. How about we start telling them what they should be doing? If you're a New Yorker between the ages of 14 and 24, it's time to start thinking about how you're going to spend your summer. And the city's here to help. The Summer Youth Employment Program is back for 2026. This program, also known as SYEP, connects young New Yorkers with employers so that you get a paid job, real experience, and helps you kickstart your professional career. And if you're a local employer hiring summer staff through SYEP, the city will foot the bill. And all we ask for in return is that you help build the next generation of leaders in our city. So don't get caught sleeping. Apply today at nyc.gov/SYEP.
All right, that was fun. So Friends, in the chat, please tell me who were some of the key audiences that Mayor Mamdani was trying to reach with his key messages. Yeah, go ahead and feel free to answer. Youth and employers, ages 14 to 24, employers of youth, young adults, local employers. Yep, you're picking up what he's putting down. Fantastic. Okay, pop quiz question numero dos. Can you name one or more key messages that the mayor gave us in his video? What stuck with you that he said? And what action did he want you to take? City will cover the cost. So it's of no cost to that teen or to that employer. Summer's coming, you should make a plan. So even though many of us are surrounded by ice and snow today, that you teenagers should think about your summer plan. He gives you the website. He gives you nyc.gov. Act now, sign up online. Fantastic. Yep. So you can see here, his team planned this out. This was something that they made sure that they designed with some precision. They also made sure that the mayor was using some sticky images, which he's uniquely talented at, in his video. He's tanning on a couch in a suit. He's got his red sunglasses on. He's got a towel around his neck. It's memorable. It sticks with you. So this is just one kind of fun example to hopefully help inspire some creative thinking. All right, next slide. Okay. So the next thing to think through, as Mayor Mamdani shows us, is you should think through what the audiences you are trying to reach are experiencing throughout the year. So this is just an example kind of quickie editorial calendar to think about. But you probably have other events, deadlines in your mind that your key audience will be experiencing. So if you're looking to reach constituents, you know that in the winter, they are going to be dealing with extreme cold, snow and ice, cold and flu. They're also going to be celebrating holidays a lot of the time. In the spring, there could be mosquito-borne illnesses and ticks. There's allergies, there's asthma, there's spring break. What are they experiencing and what can you offer at those times to help keep them healthy and safe? Summer, we've got heat, we've got water safety. And then fall, we've got back to school and making sure that we're vaccinated. So thinking through what those folks are experiencing, thinking through, as Mayor Mamdani did, that if folks want to make sure that their themselves or their children are in that teen program this summer, so they're not just kind of hanging out bored, that they're thinking about that in January. All right, next slide. All right, so here's just an example of this that my team worked on with Safe States. But around Memorial Day, which is sort of the start of the swim season, which I'm sure lots of folks on this call who work on drowning prevention are well aware of, we got a piece placed in Politico about the importance of the CDC Injury Center and how exactly they help prevent drownings. All right, next slide. Okay, so the next thing to think through is that I am sure that we have a lot of data lovers on the line, which is always a good thing. Having a strategy that is driven by data is really, really important. At the same time, we want to make sure that we are telling stories. Why? Because a lot of the time after an audience reads a piece, listens to an interview, and have heard lots of data pieces of data kind of peppered into your messaging, a lot of times what they come away remembering are the stories, not the data. So we want to make sure that we have a few stories at the ready that illustrate key points. So some of the things that you want to think through are story spotting. So in your work, are there compelling storytellers that do not come from an official source, that have kind of skin in the game on your issue? They have a compelling story, personal story to tell, that is authentic. We want to do what we can to lift up those stories and to make sure that they are discoverable for our audiences. And we want to amplify those stories as we're doing earned media. So sometimes that could be your office telling that story on behalf of a victim or an affected person. But a lot of times the most effective way to tell those stories is to have that person tell the story themselves. It does take some preparation. You don't want to put someone in front of media who is unfamiliar with how to talk to journalists. You want to make sure that they understand how to tell their story, that it's practiced, and that they're using language that your key audiences can understand. You want to think through really carefully the setting for that story, and you want to think through when you're telling it. So again, if you've got that editorial calendar and you've got that compelling story that connects with an issue that your audience is going to be thinking about in May or October, you want to line up that storyteller to dovetail with your editorial calendar. Next slide. Okay. So here's just another example that we worked on with Safe States. So this is an op-ed by Sharon Gilmartin, the executive director of Safe States, who is a fantastic earned media spokeswoman. And she, in her op-ed about the importance of the injury center at CDC, that's a campaign that we're working on with Safe States, tells the story of a woman named Haley Jelinek, who's from Nebraska and works on overdose prevention. Haley Jelinek is an incredibly effective storyteller in her own right. She has a son who died of overdose, and remarkably, in her process of healing, has delivered hundreds of boxes of Narcan to bars and restaurants in her community, and spends a lot of her time educating folks in her community about how to use Narcan to reverse overdose. She's a hero. So Sharon told the story of Haley Jelinek and her work in this op-ed, and she's also told it to journalists in other formats. But finding the Haley Jelineks who really bring home a point about how we can save lives effectively in your work, in your sector, is really, really important. Those are gold, and you want to use those as much as you can. Next slide. Okay, so once we have our key audiences, once we have our strategic objectives, once we have our key messages, once we have our editorial calendar, our calls to action, our landing pages on our websites all ready to go, so that a curious person who hears your interview can go there and do what you would like them to do. How do we reach out to journalists exactly? Let's break it down. So you want to spend some time figuring out who is writing and reporting and broadcasting on your issue. It is likely not a massive group of journalists who have demonstrated a really keen interest and have your issue as part of their beat. You want to make sure that you're looking at the folks who are already writing about your issue, and you want to make sure that you are aligning your strategy, again, going back to those initial slides, with the outlets that your key audiences are reading and consuming most. And when you put those two things together, you're going to have your target list of journalists. So you want to create a relationship with those folks. You want to do some proactive outreach to them. Some of the things that we do on our team is showing them that you're reading their stuff. Just reach out, acknowledge their coverage. If they've done a good job spotlighting your issue, doing a thoughtful piece about it, drop them a note. A lot of the time, especially with print journalists, their email addresses are publicly available. We also can use social media to direct message journalists too. I can't tell you how rare it is to just simply reach out to a journalist and tell them, hey, I read your work and I thought it was really thoughtful and good. Let them know what they can come to you for. What kind of information do you have? What kind of sources, stories do you have that can help them in their reporting? So you want to have your own call to action for that journalist. Can you guys grab coffee? Can you set up a tour of a facility or a site that you are working on, perhaps with your boss? Show this journalist your work. Show, don't tell. And then lastly, if they don't get back to you right away, just keep trying them. Keep them in the loop about what you're working on. If there is an event or a development that coincides with their beat and your issues, drop them a note and let them know how you're responding to it. If we, let's say, have a snow or ice storm and you're doing the good work to keep people safe in your community during that time, just let them know what that is. Surface it for them. Make it easy to find. All right, next slide. All right, the next thing that can be non-intuitive, but is definitely worth some thought, is what's in it for the journalist. So maybe you've been working on a certain program. You are ready to tell the world about it. It's something that your team has worked on for 6 months. You're super excited about it, or you have a new piece of data. You want to think through not just your own team and your own organization and what you would get out of coverage, but what that journalist will get out of the new information that you have to provide. So this is not an exhaustive list, but these are some of the things that they perhaps could get from you and your team. Expert analysis. If you have seen an event many, many times before, and it's other folks' first time, a wildfire, an earthquake, there are some of you who see emergencies like that, have seen them in your career many times, and can help do some sense making for the journalist and for the public. How can you characterize that moment? Maybe you have new data that you have access to, showing that a certain health issue is going up or down, or affecting a certain subgroup differently than it affects others. A lot of times, many of you work in coalitions where you can represent a collective voice of a lot of people. So instead of that journalist showing up at a shopping mall and trying to find a needle in a haystack, or interview 20 to 30 people, maybe you have a way of getting 4 to 5 people on a Zoom and collecting those voices for the journalist to save them time. Perhaps you have an exclusive update that is embargoed, which means it's not available to the public, on a certain development or event. Perhaps you have a compelling description or story about impact that this journalist is unable to find. Perhaps you are just playing a connecting role. So you know your sector better than that journalist does. A lot of times their beats are far, they are wide. They're covering a back to school event in the morning. They're covering a storm in the afternoon. They're covering a town hall meeting or a city hall meeting in the evening. You have studied your issue. You are more connected with who has which resources in your sector than that journalist does. Play a connecting role and try to get them the information and the people they need. All right, next slide. Okay, the next thing that you want to make sure you do is get your spokespeople ready. If you're going to be putting either a storyteller, an expert, or a leader out in front of journalists on a certain issue, you want to make sure that they're prepared. My team always says a media interview is not a good place to have an original thought. So you want to make sure that you have those key messages ready to go in the format that spokesperson will use them and read them. If you can, do some mock Q&A where you ask them questions that they're likely to get asked before they go into that interview. And if they have a few blooper answers in Q&A, you're doing your job because you're getting them to work out those kinks before they talk about it live. If there is something that spokesperson is afraid of being asked, ask that question in practice. And you can ask them, what are you afraid of being asked? And then practice it. And the only way for them to improve their answer is to practice it repeatedly before they go in front of a bank of cameras or before they do that one-on-one interview. Next slide. Okay, some of these things in setting up interviews, tips and tricks that my team uses to just make sure everybody shows up once you've done all this work to set up an interview. Some of these things are very intuitive, and yet a lot of folks don't do them, and there are missed connections. Set the right date and time. Make sure that everybody knows when and where they are supposed to connect. There can be time differences. There can be times of day where that journalist is actually going to be writing their story and have wrapped up all their interviews. So for the journalist, mornings might be ideal. Or if you're responding to an event that has occurred earlier that day, make sure you are doing that outreach and securing that interview before the news cycle is over. So if that hearing ends at 11 a.m., you want to make sure that you are lining up that interview to happen as soon as possible after that public hearing. Be easy to access. Make sure that you get everyone the Zoom link, the Teams link, the phone number that they need. Send a confirmation email. Make sure that it is easy to find. Our team doesn't just send emails, but we also send calendar invites so that nobody has to dig in their inbox in order to find that link or that phone number, and make it crystal clear who is going to call who here. So you want to just avoid any confusion at all. Next slide. All right. So then there's monitoring, and monitoring is going to give you both the information about which journalists may be writing on your issue and which journalists have already mentioned your issue in a story or have mentioned your organization in a story in the past. So you want to make sure that you are looking at who is writing on your topic. And some of you might say, I work on a niche topic. It really doesn't get written about very much. Okay, then think about kind of the ancillary topics, the topics that parallel the issue that you work on. What's related, and who has expressed an interest or shown that it is within their beat to write on a related topic. What is their tone? There are lots of journalists out there who might have a column, for instance, and have a certain point of view that they're advancing with that column. You want to be aware of that before you reach out to them and set up an interview. Who typically reads or listens or watches the content and the stories that they're creating? Does that match up with an audience that you are looking to cultivate, a readership that you are looking to cultivate? Then the next step is just start establishing those contact lists. If you have a media monitoring program like Meltwater, Critical Mention, my team uses Muckrack. These are expensive programs that not everyone has access to. It's okay if you don't have access to it. You can bust out a Google spreadsheet and you can start collecting email addresses when you see a piece that really hits all of the specs that you're looking to satisfy. Save that piece, save the name of that journalist, and save their publicly available email address. So I do want to note that we're not really talking much about crisis communications today, but having this list at the ready is one of the first steps in creating a crisis comms plan, so that if there is an emergency or a major development that you need to respond to rapidly, you've already got that list ready to go. Next slide. Okay, this is our last slide, and then we'll go to questions. These are some of the free things that you can do today after we get off this webinar, just to get started or to advance a comm strategy that you already have. Make it a point to monitor media daily. If you have 15 minutes, work within the amount of time that you have. So block out some time on your calendar if that helps you make sure that you keep that time open to just consume media on your issue and become familiar with the journalists who are reporting on it. Be aware of your media diet. We all have some tendencies to be drawn to the outlets that we have always read. Make sure that you are also familiarizing yourself with some of the outlets that are read by some of these groups that you are looking to cultivate in your key audiences. Reserve time to practice on the calendar of your spokesperson who you're looking to prepare. It will likely take a few sessions and a few refreshers over time. If you're working with someone who's done media for decades, a lot of times they have actually not practiced in a really long time. And sometimes you've got a communicator internally who's never done earned media before. And the best way to start is to just do those mock interviews. Find out what those weak spots are so that you are both aware of them and can work on them. Start an editorial calendar. We are at the beginning of the year here in 2026, and it is not too late at the end of January to create an editorial calendar for 2026 if you don't have one. If creating it for the entire year is slightly overwhelming, just work on this quarter. Start there. And then there are just calendar appointments. This honestly is a form of leadership. Clarity is a form of leadership. Be that one who reserves time on the calendar of the folks that you want to reach to make sure that they see you, they hear from you, and that all the trains keep running on time and that people meet at the place and time that they need to in order to connect. Next slide. And that's it. We will turn to questions. So I'm going to hop in the Q&A box now. I see we have a few questions there already, but I would love to see some more questions from folks in the Q&A. And I will go through and answer them. All righty. So first question is from Acacia Landfield. Acacia asks, to what extent do we, the royal we, advocates and media journalists need to socialize some messages during seasons that most of the public don't normally think of for a particular health issue? So, for instance, water safety during all times of the year, even winter. So that's a great question. A couple thoughts. One is that you want to think through what your audiences are likely thinking about during certain times of the year and what they are seeking information about during certain times of the year. Now, making sure that we're talking about drowning during the summer and the late spring should be top priority, because that's when the most stories are going to be written on that topic, and that's when a lot of folks are going to be talking about and seeking information on that issue. However, there are certainly lots of families who sign up their children for winter swim lessons, for instance. You want to make sure that you are encouraging that behavior, that great behavior, in the winter too. And that might be something that's just like a little bit out of the ordinary that could be of interest to a journalist. Journalists love to hear the words, "This is a really unreported issue. Not a lot of folks have reported on it," because then they get to cover some new ground or write a story that hasn't been written before. Okay. Next question. Any advice? Sorry, this is from Sarah Turkic. Any advice for making suggestions for preparation to agency colleagues who may be overconfident in their interview readiness? Strong egos at play. Yes, Sarah. I am picking up what you're putting down. So I would say that the best thing to do is to simply engage them to practice. You don't necessarily have to do a one-on-one practice. You could do it in a small group. I have found that it's really effective to have groups of spokespeople where there is a mix of experience levels, where some of the folks who are less experienced can learn from some of the more experienced folks. So if you have that person who has done media before but may have a few blind spots, engage with them, invite them in as a leader, but then to teach some of their colleagues what they know. But then once you're in there, give them some of those tougher questions that they may not have had a lot of practice with, and it can surface some of those issues that need to be ironed out. Okay. Next question is from Brandy Valentine. Can you talk about when to do an exclusive with a journalist and why? Great question, Brandy. Okay. So there are going to be certain situations, right, where there is a public development, where a number of journalists will be writing on that, again, public hearing or wildfire or other issue that day. And it makes sense to reach out to a number of journalists at once, and to make your expert or health official available to respond and to update the public about the work that they're doing to keep people safe and healthy. There are other times when there is a sensitive issue, perhaps where you really want to make sure that the journalist covering it in that initial piece aligns with a fair point of view on that issue. And in that case, it is smart to really study where that journalist has come from in their coverage, and to work with that journalist one-on-one. Another reason that we have sometimes pursued exclusives is if there is a journalist that has a really large audience and has a fantastic reputation, is super influential with the audience that we are looking to reach. Sometimes they say, I will only cover this issue if you give me an exclusive. And so we've granted an exclusive. Other times, there has been a small, I'd say, sort of process-oriented development that doesn't necessarily have wide appeal. But as I told you, my team is based in Washington, D.C. We work on a lot of different federal policy issues. And some of those issues, those developments only appeal to sort of a smallish audience of sort of in the know, influential folks in Washington. But sort of a USA Today reader, an NBC nightly news watcher would not be interested in them. So we have given an exclusive to a journalist who covers Capitol Hill super carefully. So for us, some of those publications are Politico or Roll Call or The Hill. So those are kind of three different reasons: a sensitive issue, an issue where the journalist is your target journalist, they're super important and they want an exclusive and they request it. And then the third is sort of if it's a niche issue that just doesn't have wide public appeal, but is really crucial to your strategic objectives. All right, I think we've got some questions in the chat. All righty. Okay. So Sarah's asking about media outreach related to increases in child abuse or in other super sensitive topics, where the victims with those compelling stories, might be minors, for instance, or other folks who are just not fit to go to the press. And that's a fantastic question, Sarah. So ethical storytelling really deserves its own session. But we always want to make sure that the person with that compelling story is fully aware of the risks of their involvement with the story. And we want to make sure also that that person is able to make rational decisions about whether or not they're involved. So in the case of child abuse or a like issue that's really sensitive, we'd want to make sure that we're putting a journalist not in touch with a child victim, but instead with an adult who has a lot of experience in that issue and can protect the identities of the victims. So that's a really great question. And it's something where you want to make sure that internally within your organization, you have a thoughtful conversation and a policy about which types of voices you are going to platform and surface not just for journalists, but for also things like your social media feeds and your newsletters.